Survival horror might be one of the oldest genres in gaming, but its thrills are a rare treat nowadays. However, few games have popularized a genre like Resident Evil did. But is this game horrifying because of its monsters, or is it its execution? In Resident Evil, you play as either Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine as you attempt to find out what happened to Bravo team in their investigation of a peculiar mansion. As it turns out, the mansion's inhabitants seem to have been the victims of an outbreak and have all devolved into flesh-eating monsters, eliminating Bravo team in the process. And it's your job to get to the bottom of it, and find out exactly why this happened. For a mainstream game this old, you'd expect nothing more than an excuse plot, yet the story is surprisingly fleshed out, and actually quite interesting. Gameplay is a mix of unforgiving combat and puzzle solving. You can only fire while stationary, and since your inventory is limited, conserving ammo is a must. Thankfully, there are storage chests in many areas where you can unload some excess items, and since for some reason an item you stored in one chest can be recovered in any other of them, it keeps the game from being impossible. The infected humans and animals in the mansion are quite deadly, and since ammo is in short supply, caution is advised. Avoiding their attacks is even more important, as one bite from a walking dead will leave you without a third of your health. Running past enemies is not impossible, but poor timing and occasionally cheap enemy placement means that combat can be your only option. There's also melee combat in the form of a knife, but given that you can usually only land one hit before being grabbed by a zombie, it ends up being useless. The puzzle solving is mostly reasonable, but some head scratchers might just send you to a walkthrough. Also, saving can only be done at typewriters, and while they're mostly reasonably placed, later typewriters are quite far from one another. Control is character relative, and due to the slow turn speed, it is more commonly referred to as tank controls, and believe me, they live up to that name. The cramped environments and strong enemies can be a nightmare to reckless players, but once you get used to the control, it all just works. The game also deals with difficulty in an interesting manner. Instead of choosing difficulty modes, you'll have to choose between playing as either Chris or Jill. As Jill, you can carry more items, not to mention that in a few key moments, you will receive additional supplies and even help in story-critical moments from Barry. As Chris, you can carry less, and saving your game is only possible if you're carrying ink ribbons, which are in limited supply. In short, Jill is equivalent to normal, and Chris is equivalent to hard. Needless to say, play as Jill first. Unfortunately, the voice acting is arguably more horrible than anything else in the game. Voice acting was something new to games in the 90s, and Resident Evil is a clear example of this. It's so bad, it's genuinely hilarious, especially when combined with the suspect English translation.
And Jill, here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
Unfortunately, the game actually tries to take itself somewhat seriously, but the voice acting makes that impossible, and the result is a tonally inconsistent experience. Graphically, the game looks okay, but the maximum resolution is 640 by 480, which means the game will look like a pixelated mess no matter what, but otherwise it actually looks okay, as for the time it did push the original PlayStation to its limits. If nothing else, the game has a strong atmosphere thanks to its gloomy environments and suspenseful soundtrack. Resident Evil's control and general design shows its age, yet it's still a great survival horror game that can still be enjoyed today, even if sometimes not how the developers originally intended.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
And as a side note, know that the only way to get it legally in this day and age is via PlayStation Network. If, however, you insist on the PC version, your only option is abandonware sites, as Capcom simply refused to release it digitally for PC despite demand not just from fans but also their own staff. Ultimately, Resident Evil is a game that deserved its success. Horrible voice acting aside, it's tense, has a compelling storyline, and challenging gameplay. If you can put up with its antiquated presentation and dated gameplay, you will enjoy it, and as such, it comes highly recommended.